Hey, what's your favorite memory of home? You're like, what? Well, we're starting a new series on Welcome Home. And when you think about home, I'm asking you, what's your favorite memory of home? I think my favorite memory of home was probably playing in the Highline Canal behind our house and finding crawdads. And I wanted to avoid the snakes. I hate snakes. But crawdads were cool. And my dad and I used to go crawdad hunting, and we would get a whole huge harvest of them, and then we chopped off their tails, chopped off their heads, boiled their tails, and had a delicious crawdad bake. You're like, do you live in Louisiana? Nope, I live in Denver. And don't ask me how I knew any of that, but that's one of my favorite memories of home. And I think when we think about home, it's important for us to consider what are some great things that happen, but also sometimes home is not always a great place, what we think of it with home. And I was thinking about this because if you think about the Israelites in Numbers chapter 11 as well as Numbers chapter 14, the Israelites were being led by Moses out of slavery from Egypt, and Moses was leading them through the wilderness, and he was supposed to lead them into the promised land. Now, when you think about it, the Israelites had been in slavery for quite some time, like several generations. And the Egyptians, the pharaohs, had been unkind and cruel, mean to them. And this is where we get Moses doing the 10 plagues, and then you have, the frogs and the lice and all this, boils and all these horrible things. And then the firstborn, and the blood on the mantle, Passover, all this stuff. So when Moses leads the Israelites out of captivity, out of Egypt, they cross the Red Sea, all these miracles happen, and now they're in the wilderness and they're supposed to move on into the promised land. But there's some challenges. They struggle with unbelief and they struggle with not trusting Moses, not believing in God. And at one point, there's a couple points where they wish they could go back home. They want to go back to Egypt. And they give some quotes to this. In Numbers 11, verse 5, it says, "We remember the fish we used to eat in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. And now we hate this stupid manna. We have to eat this stupid stuff every day. Back home, we had delicious food." Oh, but just don't forget that you had slave masters who beat you to a bloody pulp. You had laws that made you kill your firstborn male, all male children. Back home, you have these fond recollections, and then you think back, and then Numbers chapter 14, verse 4, it says they want to go back to Egypt. We want to go back home, and sometimes home can be a very bad thing. Home can be a very destructive memory, a destructive situation. I have some friends, they grew up and the parents were alcoholics. Some of them were missing in action. Some of them were violent and, would beat, verbally or physically beat them. I have friends that have had these experiences, and there's parts of home for them that they liked. They have fond recollections of, various experiences like meals they had, or, mom brought home a nice bunch of clothes, or I loved my dog or my cat, and there's some memories with home that we think, oh, I want to go back to that. But sometimes the home that we remember had a whole lot of poison and lots of dangerous, bad, unhealthy, toxic stuff. And so I think about this whole idea of home. And if we think about the home that we grew up in, whether it's a physical house or the family that we had or didn't have, some of us had, in essence, surrogate parents, surrogate families, because the one that was our natural or adopted family was not healthy, was not a safe place. And so we would go to other people's houses, and stay with other people's families because they were safe. And sometimes we have those memories of a safe home, a safe family, something that was constructive, something that was healthy for us. So as we think about home, I want us to consider that in this human existence, that's what we all are. We are all human. No one among us is perfect. No home, no family was perfect. Some are better than others. Some are just different. And some you're like, well, they had a great upbringing compared to mine. And then you hear the inside scoop and, oh, not quite. Home. And I think we have to be honest about our human existence and our human upbringing. There's pluses and minuses. But let's be mindful that we don't think back to something through a lens of denial or distortion, the absence of truth, to think that it was something that it was not. Stop! We've got a joke break! Oh my goodness, you have to have a joke break. Of course, because you need to groan at least a little bit. So, here's your joke with our joke break. Why did the old woman fall into the pit? Because she couldn't see that well. Gosh, that is so stupid. I know, but we know that next week will be better. And let's get back to something a little bit more uplifting. That's what the Israelites did when they were free from Egypt and they got out and had complete freedom. They still looked back to some of those things that they thought were good, and they saw them through a very dysfunctional, distorted lens. Let's be mindful that ultimately, our ultimate home, the safest place for us to find our hearts, for our hearts to have a home, is with Jesus, with our Heavenly Father. So as we think about this series, home, we're going to keep talking about. This week we talked about where home can be very hurtful, but then we're going to talk next week about what happens when we're a prodigal and we're not at home and we behave in ways that are anti-godly or disconnected from our relationship with God. What does that look like? Make sure you watch next week.